In November of 1930, a fur trapper walked into a small village on the edge of a frozen lake in northern Canada. Every single person was gone. No bodies, no signs of a struggle, just empty homes and a pot of food still sitting on the stove, untouched.
What he found that day would go on to become one of the strangest unsolved mysteries in North American history. And almost 100 years later, we still don't have an answer. This is the story of the Anjikuni Lake disappearance. Anjikuni Lake sits deep in the Nunavut territory of Canada, about as remote as it gets, frozen for most of the year, surrounded by hundreds of miles of empty tundra. The kind of place where, if something happens to you, no one's coming to help.
A small Inuit community lived along the lake's shore, around 30 people. Hunters, families, an entire functioning village that had existed there for generations, adapted perfectly to one of the harshest environments on Earth. And then, according to the story that's been told for nearly a century, they simply vanished. All of them, in what looked like a single night.
The man who discovered it was a trapper named Joe Labelle. He wasn't a stranger to this village. He'd visited many times over the years, trading goods, stopping in for shelter, knowing many of the residents personally.
So when he arrived that November evening, expecting the usual welcome, dogs barking, smoke from cooking fires, people going about their evening, and instead found nothing. Silence. He knew immediately that something was deeply wrong.
He walked through the village, calling out names. No response. He checked tent after tent, home after home. Empty. Not ransacked, just empty. Like everyone had simply stood up and walked away mid-task. Here's where the story gets genuinely unsettling. The fires in several of the homes were still burning or recently extinguished, meaning whatever happened recently, possibly within hours. There was food, sitting in pots, prepared but never eaten. Clothing, heavy winter coats, boots, tools, all left behind. In an environment where stepping outside without proper gear for even a short time can be fatal, this detail alone is bizarre. You don't leave your coat behind in Arctic temperatures, not unless you're not thinking clearly, or you're not planning on needing it.
And then there were the dogs. The sled dogs, essential to survival in that environment. Animals that would never normally be abandoned, were found still tied to their posts, dead, starved, which tells us something important. Whatever happened, the people never came back. Not after one day, not after several. Labelle searched further and found something that, depending on which version of the story you read, either confirms something tragic or makes the whole thing even stranger. A nearby grave site, one that locals said had been undisturbed for a long time, appeared to have been dug open. Not from the outside, the way someone digging in would do it. According to the account, it looked disturbed from the inside out.
Labelle reported what he found, and the Royal Canadian Mounted Police were sent to investigate. No small task, given how remote the location was. Search teams combed the surrounding wilderness for any sign of the missing villagers. They were looking for footprints, blood, drag marks, anything that would explain a mass exodus or an attack. They found nothing. No trail leading away from the village in any direction. No evidence of an animal attack. No evidence of violence at all.
Whatever happened to these 30 people, it left no physical trace beyond the village itself.
Around the same time, several residents in the broader region reported something else. Strange lights in the night sky over the lake in the days leading up to the disappearance. Witnesses described them as moving in ways that didn't match anything natural, hovering for long stretches, then darting off at speeds that didn't make sense before disappearing entirely. On their own, strange lights in a remote northern sky aren't necessarily significant. Aurora activity, atmospheric phenomena, and even military test flights have all been blamed for similar sightings throughout history. But combined with everything else, the empty village, the disturbed grave, the total absence of remains, it's easy to see why this detail became part of the legend.
So, what actually happened? Let's go through the leading explanations, starting with the most grounded, ending with the most extreme.
Theory 1. A sudden, catastrophic storm. The Arctic doesn't give warnings. A storm can roll in within minutes and turn a clear day into a whiteout, with wind chill capable of killing a person in under an hour. If the community had gathered outside the village for a hunt, a ceremony, or simple daily activity, and a storm hit without warning, it's plausible that exposure could have killed them quickly, and that their remains could have later been buried under snowfall, swept into the lake, or scattered by wildlife over the following decades. This theory accounts for the suddenness, but it doesn't fully explain the untouched food, the abandoned clothing inside warm homes, or why a search team combing the area found absolutely nothing, not even a single trace.
Theory 2. This story has been exaggerated, or even partially invented over time. This is the theory that serious historians and journalists tend to lean toward. When researchers have gone back through Canadian newspaper archives and official RCMP records from that era, they've found inconsistencies, dates that don't line up, names that can't be verified, and an original news report that may have significantly dramatized a much smaller, more mundane event. It's entirely possible that something did happen at Anjikuni Lake. Maybe a smaller group went missing. Maybe there was a tragic accident. And that the story grew larger and stranger with every retelling over the following decades, the way folklore tends to do. By the time it reached mainstream newspapers and radio broadcasts, the embellishments had become inseparable from whatever facts existed underneath. Theory 3. This is the one that made the story famous. The combination of the lights in the sky, the disturbed grave, the missing remains, and the total disappearance of an entire community has made this one of the most cited cases in UFO and paranormal folklore. The theory suggests something beyond conventional explanation was involved, and whether you believe that or not, it's clearly the version of the story that captured public imagination and kept it alive for nearly 100 years. There's no physical evidence supporting this explanation, but it's worth noting. In cases where the official record is this incomplete, the absence of evidence isn't necessarily absence of absence. It just means we don't know. What separates Anjikuni Lake from a typical disappearance story is the sheer scale of unanswered questions. This wasn't one person who vanished. It was an entire functioning community, multiple generations, families, children, gone, with virtually nothing left behind to explain it. In most missing persons cases, even cold ones, there's usually something. A body eventually recovered, a witness who comes forward decades later, a piece of physical evidence that resurfaces. With this case, even after nearly a century, nothing has ever surfaced. No remains, no survivors, no confirmed explanation from any official source. And the deeper issue, the one that keeps researchers up at night, the documentation from that era in this part of Canada is incomplete. Remote government outposts in 1930 didn't always keep detailed records, especially regarding Indigenous communities, meaning that even basic facts, like the exact population of the village or the precise timeline of events, can't be fully verified today. That gap is exactly where this story has lived for almost 100 years, caught between something clearly happened and we will likely never know exactly what. Cases like this aren't entirely unique. Throughout history, there are other instances of communities vanishing under unclear circumstances.
The Roanoke colony in the late 1500s being perhaps the most famous parallel, where over 100 English settlers disappeared, leaving behind only a single cryptic carved word as a clue. What connects these cases isn't necessarily a shared cause. The explanations are likely completely different. What connects them is what they represent. A reminder that even in an age of constant documentation, satellites, and instant communication, there are still gaps in the historical record large enough for entire communities to disappear into. So what really happened at Anjikuni Lake? A deadly storm that left no trace? A story stretched far beyond its original facts through decades of retelling? Or something that genuinely defies explanation? The honest answer is, we don't know. And depending on who you ask, that's either deeply unsatisfying or exactly why this story has survived for almost 100 years. What do you think actually happened? Drop your theory in the comments below. I read every single one, and some of you have theories that are honestly better than mine. If you want more stories like this, the cases the rest of the internet barely talks about, the mysteries that don't have clean endings, hit subscribe. New ones every week.